Greetings and welcome to Can We Really Talk? My name is Jamal Walker.
And I am Christine Alcamo. We created this podcast out of a desire to bring people closer together, to provide a comfortable space for people to discuss challenging and complex social issues.
It is our premise that in the midst of our differences, we can find the spaces where we are in agreement with one another. In addition, we wish to challenge ourselves and each other to speak about what is taboo.
And speaking of what is taboo, we mean, where do we struggle to speak our truth about the ways in which we fall out of alignment with movements and or ideologies we hold dear?
We are bringing to you other members of our Nevada County who have varying beliefs along the political and ideological spectrum.
It is our intention to demonstrate through podcast series that we can discuss various social issues in all of their complexity.
We believe that we as humans have the capacity to discuss these issues with respect for one another by holding our common humanity with joy and reverence. We hope that you enjoy this broadcast.
All right. Well, once again, I want to welcome everyone to Can We Really Talk? And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Isoke to get us started.
When you hear the term, quote, defunding the police, end quote, what do you believe it means and what comes up for you? So that's the part where the head part is what do you think it means? And the heart part is what comes up. What impulses, what emotions, what associations, what concerns or reliefs or whatever, what comes up for you in the emotional realm and what comes up for you intellectually, cognitively. Is that clear enough? So let me, in order to actually create a space where you can enter this the way I've asked you to, is to say, pretend that I'm someone, yeah, I think we ought to defund the police. And then your response.
If I may, I want to start by saying that to me, the feeling that comes when I hear defund the police is one of great concern, fear, basically, a fear of complete anarchy, lawlessness, not being safe out there in the street, even in our own homes. I've grown up with the view that the police were the shield that keeps us, the ordinary citizens, safe. And thinking about it, I can't help but perceive this as a noble idea, but approached in a ill-advised manner. I feel like we want instant gratification. We want to resolve the issues of police brutality right now. And that if we can take those funds away from the police, we'll get that done. And that's not really the case. I think that our goal should be to move a lot of things that kind of fell onto the shoulders of law enforcement away towards social institutions, to bring people together, to uplift those that are kind of being left behind. But we can't just do that in vacuum and instantaneously. And in the meantime, we're taking away funds from law enforcement and really from the prevention programs, from all of those extra things that are less urgent, because basically, to me, what I perceive in the call to defund the police is just leave them the bare minimum necessary to respond to violent emergencies. But that means canceling the outreach programs, canceling all the programs that are supposed to bring law enforcement and the communities together. Which kind of feels counterproductive.
So, having studied the term and having talked to a lot of people, when I first heard the term, I was just like, what does that mean? because, and the more I talk to people, what I've come to is really this place of all the language available to us. That was the best term we could come up with, because it doesn't really, in my experience, articulate what most people mean. That when we're looking at a system that is financed at over $1 billion a year, the majority of what I've read and studied suggests taking at minimum 5% of that and reallocating it to programs that uplift people and bring people up to a level of being able to live respectably on planet Earth. And yet I have also talked to people who envision that word as no police, that they literally hold that in their bodies as to strip away every dime. And I think the term was born out of pain and out of anger, and it demonstrates that. And I think it's divisive, and I think that's unfortunate, because I think it has some merit if it's in a discussion. Because the majority of people I've talked to that are just absolutely defund the police will also admit that when push comes to shove, if their life is threatened, they're going to call 911. And so then the dilemma becomes, so if we completely 100% defund the police, who do you think is going to show up? And it's just another layer of divisiveness. And admittedly, within myself, it's a mixed bag. As a former deputy, it's like, yeah, I saw things that shouldn't have happened. There are problems in the system that need to be addressed. And as a female transgender man, I have experienced problems with policing where I've done nothing. you know, Being married to a Black woman, I have witnessed problems, and we have, as a couple, experienced challenges with policing, or simply being a mixed race couple, which really translates to being married to a Black woman in public. So there are problems, and but this all or nothing, polar opposites, I don't find any solution there for anything. And so when I hear it, it's an emotional grab in my gut. And I try to wrestle with the balance of, being a human being and being a husband to a Black woman and being a minister and really anchoring in the principle of oneness. And, I, and even as I go to the place of all the words available, that's what we picked. We live in a hashtag world. And I can't honestly sit here and say I know of what the best hashtag should have been, because I don't. It's a complex thing that I don't think we can encompass in a hashtag. And I think that's part of the problem.
How do I feel when I hear the word? It feels like an attack, especially as a police chief. It feels like a personal attack, that I am not suited to do this job, that our people don't do it well, that that the institution of law enforcement and the person-to-person service delivery every day is flawed, and that the only way to fix it is to completely abolish it with nothing to replace it. That's what I think it means to some people, but very few. In my experience in talking to people, I find common ground with a lot of individuals when we speak about the term. And I agree that I wish we could go back, whoever wrote that down for the first time, I wish they could be in a conversation like this, because it is a very poorly delivered message in my view. When I speak to people about it, it seems as though, and maybe this is regional, but it seems as though there's common ground on all sides, including law enforcement, that over the years, law enforcement has continued to evolve and continued to have societal ills placed at our feet and said, no one else will do it. You folks need to take this on. All the while not providing resources, both from a human capital and training standpoint and from a financial capital. So what I think is incredibly interesting about the term is that, in fact, if people want service delivery that handles some of these other social issues far beyond crime and violent crime specifically, and instances where somebody needs to show up to intervene in that moment for that issue, I think that we would actually need to fund something at a higher level. I'm totally open to the idea of who does that, but as I've seen in a number of initiatives over my years now in policing, is that we just change the model, but we don't really come up with a new way to do it better. So it definitely feels like a punch in the gut when you see it on a sign or you hear someone say it, especially when your job is to lead an organization of people that you believe at your very core only are doing it because they truly want to make a difference. And even when bad things happen in law enforcement, I don't for a minute believe in this organization that people come into work and think, today I'm going to go do some bad stuff and just get away with it. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, thank you, Asoke. So when I hear that term, I agree with, I mean, several, I guess everybody has said it before me, but I think it's an unfortunate choice of words. You know, my profession is one where I have to choose my words really well and deliberate over them and plan those words so that they deliver the meaning that needs to be conveyed without alienating anyone who needs to hear it. Right, as a minister, that's my duty, is to do that, right? To be as clear and precise as possible, so that as many people as possible can hear the message without being turned away because of a failure on my part to express myself well. And so from that side of me, I think, you know, something like I wish it had been like reimagine policing or something like that, right? You know, that would be a cool hashtag. Let's reimagine policing. Let's figure out how we can care for a community, how we can deal with, you know, the different challenges we have. Let's evaluate whether what we're doing is the most beneficial way to do it. At the same time, I understand that, you know, like on some level, our time seems to really call for shocking words that kind of rouse us from our stupor. And I think this does that. It certainly ends up on people's tongues quite a lot. Unfortunately, I hear it used as like a weapon against the movement. You know, it's you know, and on some level, it's given ammunition to people who do not support or do not support what they think it is. And so that makes me sad. It makes me sad that we're in a moment where, you know, where there is so much distrust and there is so much lack of understanding and unwillingness to talk. And personally, I think we're in a really hard moment because everything is sloganized. And I have a personal revulsion to slogans because I feel like they box people into a position which the person might not actually hold, or hold it the way you think they hold it, because all you've got to go on is a slogan. And what I really think we need is more of what we're doing tonight, or what I hope we're doing tonight, which is talking and understanding what we really mean when we say something, or what do we really feel about it. Because like so many have said, I think there is a lot of common ground there. And And I hope we can find that. So for me, it's, you know, it's a hard word choice. It's one I have spent a lot of time trying to understand, because I think it's worthy of my understanding. And I also, you know that I come from a perspective where I've never experienced law enforcement as anything but friendly to me and helpful to me. And so I know that is not the common American experience. And so I feel it's, you know, my duty to learn more about, like, where is this coming from and what does it mean? And to be an advocate as much as I can.
Wow.
If I may, I really took to reimagine policing. It really hit something within me, because what I feel like defund the police is it comes across as a negative, take away from the police, rather than let's find a solution. Let's make things better. And so reimagine policing would have been a much better hashtag. I had to say that.
So I have to say, as a Black woman who has 2 Black children, I at times get terrified. I have to have the talk with my kids about, okay, if you are pulled over, this is what you do. Knowing the whole entire time that even if they are doing exactly what they are being told, that it could be a death sentence that they are pulled over by the police. That's reality. That's just what is happening in the world. Now, is that what's happening in our little town? There's been some incidents that I have been aware of where the police are called simply for us being there. And we don't know if we're going to walk away from that, because we don't know who's coming and what that's going to mean. We don't know who that police officer is. I would like to be able to trust that it's going to be fine. I would love to be able to trust that's going to be fine. But that's not the case. That's not the case on a national basis. And I also at times get terrified that should, God forbid, something happen, and I'm calling because I need help, is something going to turn? Because we've all seen that play out as well. Now, do I think police are necessary? Absolutely. Absolutely. When I think of defunding the police, or that term, I have always thought about it as putting the funding towards help for the police. So funky term, but I always, and I did the research to know what that would mean. So I hope the police get the help that is needed. And I hope we can come up with a solution, because it's needed.
Yeah. So from a feeling standpoint, yeah, when I hear the term defunding police, I get a little nervous, and not so. I think some of my nervousness and my tension comes from more thinking that a lot of people who are touting that idea haven't done the research to really know what that conversation really means. And some people, there are a lot of people out there who really just do want to just get rid of all the police. And again, you know, kind of going off of what Reverend Rafe was saying about the polarization of things, is there are a lot of assumptions made, for one, about, you know, who wants to defund the police. There are a lot of assumptions made that, you know, if you're Black or brown skin, you automatically want to defund the police. There are assumptions that are made that if you are for defunding or reallocating funds within the department, you know, as we know that that's more what that means, then you must be automatically, you must therefore be anti-police, and you're probably pro BLM and anti, you know, it's just like we're putting people into categories so quickly that it makes it very difficult to have the conversation. So I'm really glad that we're able to do that here, and to talk about the complexity, and to talk about the fact that, you know, people can both want to see this reimagining of the police, and also be supportive of the police. They're not mutually exclusive.
So for me, I just to get my voice in here, I would say, you know, there is a failure on our part, typically around many issues, to roll up our sleeves and say, this is our problem. We got to deal with it. This is our problem. We have to show up and be there for the police to see us and feel us and hear us in a loving way, right? Like with high expectations. I think that there's a fear of going toward what you want. It's much easier to keep talking about what's messed up. But what about like showing up and saying, let's sit down together and figure out what to do. I trust you. I want to trust you. I want to feel like a part of the community and like you are thinking and my children when you're doing your job. And so here I am, smell me, think, hear me, you know, see me, so that you know, okay, like that hasn't happened. You know, we are raised with so much division, and people have never seen, you know, some people have never seen or been around people of color or whatever, and they just don't have a basis from which to feel trust, to feel relaxed, to know that, oh, you know, these people are just like anybody else. So, and, you know, in addition to that, there are social ills that plague communities of color that then make it more complicated, right? Because then there's maybe slightly higher level of desperation, slightly higher level of hostility. How do we work with that? We, you know, just as, you know, in my mind, the police should acknowledge that, yes, there's a problem. Community needs to say, yes, we have to acknowledge that we are creating some problems here as well. Like there's work to be done on both sides. So I'm not into making it your problem. Like it's our problem. And yeah, I think that's all I want to say about it.
To me, it feels like we entrench ourselves in like on certain words or phrases, and as you put out, Jamal, it's we forget that they're not mutually exclusive. We forget that we can be for police and yet be for Black Lives Matter, for equality and for justice. And I think part of our problem as a society is that everyone is too concentrated on the negatives that we have, rather than the positives that we can have if we actually come together, work together, bring ourselves together, and try to resolve these issues.
I agree. And you had, I believe I saw a sign that you were carrying, you know, a few months ago that that I loved. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it said Black Lives Matter.
No, it said back the blue because Black Lives Matter.
Thank you.
Yeah, to me, I feel like the fact that a lot of people feel like those two statements are mutually exclusive or are against one another is really missing the point. I mean, there's no denying that there have been instances where the communities, the Black communities, have felt oppressed, and there have been instances where law enforcement behavior was just absolutely unacceptable, violent even, and yet we can and we have to understand that the right way to resolve this is to bring the two together, to instead of having a situation where, as Christine pointed out, where a Black boy being pulled over can be a death sentence, rather have a situation where they're happy to see the police, and you know, they feel that the police protect them. That I mean, to me, I feel like there's too much. We're climbing on barricades. We're throwing our ideologies against one another rather than bringing them to a place where they meet.
So, little fish bowling here. Christine is asking me, and yeah, I'm gonna, it would be putting Alex on the spot a little bit. Brother Chief, I apologize. But Christine was suggesting that this might be a great opportunity for our chief to talk about what we have going on in terms of our work with the home team.
Your question about the home team and what we're doing, what we're doing in this county, it really drives at the heart of this question about treating people first and foremost for their humanity, and trying to see us all on an equal playing field there. So over the years, we feel like we've evolved and tried to get better at this. And I know we still have a long ways to go, but most recently we've implemented at the Grass Valley Police Department a program, which I think in some ways might be in alignment with the hashtag Reimagine Police idea, where we have an employee of Hospitality House who comes from a background of social outreach and social work, paired with a police officer who was carefully selected and shows a propensity and a desire to work with people who tend to be homeless. That's our target population, but I also have some concerns about boxing people into the word homeless, because homelessness is a condition and a symptom oftentimes of an underlying issue that maybe a person's dealing in their life. So what we're doing there is we're leveraging the resources of the home team, which is the homeless outreach medical engagement team, which is a county endeavor of 6 individuals, everybody from street outreach to case management to medical. There's a nurse on that team that can help bring medical needs to people out in the field. And our team is out doing outreach. And we have a police officer there because we want to make sure people stay safe. The group that is our targeted population is somebody, it's actually through a funding program. It's the Violence Intervention Program. And so we do know from data that folks that are experiencing homelessness and are not housed are more likely to either be the victims of criminal acts or have a propensity to be an offender of violence. So we're targeting that population, and we are trying to go out and build relationships and really break down the barriers of the stigma around law enforcement, and the fact that when we show up, we're not just there to enforce the law, but we're there to help people out of maybe a situation that they're in and move them onto a trajectory for a healthier and more successful living situation. And you know, we've already had some pretty cool success stories. In the past, we had a homeless outreach officer. They were by themselves. And what we realize now is that by pairing these resources, it really helps, because you bring someone who has the law enforcement background and a compassionate component there, and you bring someone with the social services background and an ability to know maybe what that underlying diagnosis might be of somebody and how do we address these issues, and experience working and navigating the very complex social services landscape in California, and trying to find out exactly when we can get all the stars to align, everything from the services to that point in time in someone's life when we can be most impactful to see if they're ready to make a change, and bring everyone together to work on that. One of our biggest challenges in this community is housing. We don't have adequate housing to place people, so that can be a little bit of a frustrating point, but there's a lot of people doing great work in that area too. And what it comes down to is one of the things I mentioned before, it's all about relationships. It's really hard to say no to someone when you have a strong relationship. So whether that's the individual on the street who's built a relationship and vice versa with that team, or whether it's the professional relationships between, say, that team and a social service provider or a behavioral health or a drug treatment facility, whatever it might be. Once you build those relationships, it's a lot easier to help shepherd people through a very bureaucratic system. And so that's the kind of work we're doing, and it's pretty rewarding to watch, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. And I think it's one of those conversation points that when we talk about reaching out to the community to say, what do you want to see out of your police department? This is something we've heard before, and I think it's in alignment with sort of where we're going to see trends going, and it's fun to be a trendsetter to do that here in Northern California. So this program's only been going since January. I'll give you, we're not all the way probably there yet with one individual. I'm going to keep it to this particular program. I could talk about some of the other situations in the past, but we know of a gal who was sleeping near a creek in a tent, and we have our own kind of directive here at the police department that we really want to mitigate that kind of living for a number of reasons. One, because it's not healthy usually. Two, because it's not ecologically safe. And three, because it's very dangerous for fire season. And so we want to make sure we're addressing that early on. But rather than just taking an enforcement standpoint, our officer and the social worker, they actually knew about this location and had reached out to this young woman before the complaint of just the physical complaint of having an encampment along the creek had come to my attention. And so when I reached out to our officer and the team, they said, yeah, we already know about this gal and here's what we're doing. They already had an appointment lined up with behavioral health for assessment. They had vouchers for motel living in the interim. They were working with inpatient treatment facility to try and line up treatment, and then already working on the case management for transitional housing. So that's just an example of traditional law enforcement. If we were only enforcing the law, we'd say you can't be here. There's a municipal code that says you can't camp, get out. And then you know what we'd be doing? We'd find her again the next week somewhere else, and we do the same thing, and then we'd have another environmental waste site every single time. So in our opinion, we're really trying to move the dial further upstream, no pun intended, to identify what is it that's causing this issue that is not acceptable. We pass these laws because society said it's not acceptable to just pitch a tent on the side of the creek. And so we're trying to move further up to say what's causing this and then address those concerns so it doesn't just happen again. Yeah, and just to clarify, the home team is actually, I would consider it a partner entity to our two-person team. So it's not that there's one in seven, but yeah, that whole team exists without a law enforcement presence. But we find that we know of a lot of the individuals that are in crisis in our community because of the work we do. And so it makes it really nice to be able to have that strong relationship and warm handoffs and follow it from start to finish rather than just, hey, here's who we talked to today, go deal with it. So instead it's more of a partnership.
Yeah, and it's the feeling I get is like it's a move away from criminalizing poverty, criminalizing bad luck, criminalizing health, mental health crisis. And that goes toward the reimagining, it feels to me.
Yeah, and there's also times too where maybe somebody just continues to commit low-level crime or sometimes higher-level crime, and in fact, incarceration can be a tool in the overall pathway to something different. And so
Sure.
the other thing that we're doing is working with people that are either in custody or about to be released, and actually just not saying, hey, you went to jail, we're just going to take you off the list until we see you again. Hey, you went to jail, let's use this time to try and line up the resources so when you're ready to get out, maybe you want to go directly somewhere rather than back on the streets.
Yeah, there's a lot here, right? There's a lot. I work at Glide Church and Foundation in San Francisco, and we have a program that we call An Officer and a Mensch. And we bring law enforcement and people who are attached to law enforcement together for 2.5 days. And they come to Glide and they serve meals and they stand in the line with the people who are homeless and they go get served a meal. They have nothing on that identifies them. They're encouraged to talk to people in the line, et cetera, et cetera. They take a tour of the Tenderloin. They go through a lot of things. And one of the things that we do at some point is to get the people in law enforcement to tell us what their struggles are. Because there is this way in which it's like, oh, we are the only ones suffering. And you seem to be the problem. So we are going to tell you all the ways that we're suffering, but there's not an invitation. And it's probably not as much an issue in, Nevada County, but certainly in, more concentrated, urban areas or whatever, like San Francisco, it is heartbreaking what law enforcement has to do. It is heartbreaking that they don't get the help, the attention, the resources, the empathy that they deserve in these roles. And so it cuts both ways. And I would love for that, idea of an officer and a mensch to be something that can be, spread, scaled, so that more and more of that is happening. So it's our humanity. It's like, that's what's happening. We need to see our humanity.
Yeah,
Oh.
I don't know if we're going to move on to another topic, but I'll just dovetail on to Isoke's comments, and I think it's amazing what they're doing down there. It reminds me of serving dinners at Hospitality House or whatever it might be. But what I've noticed, and maybe it's because I'm not looking, because I'm looking from my lens, but I do see the police, at least in our context and how I know it, reaching out. We're not doing as well as we should be. It takes a diligent effort. But what I tend to hear are people yelling back, whether it's at a council meeting and a public comment, with very little offering of how to do something, but rather you need to do this. Very little of my phone ringing and saying, I want to talk to you about how we can do better at X, Y, or Z. And the only place that I've ever felt that we've had meaningful conversations that turn into meaningful relationships, that turn into meaningful change, has been when we've sat down at a table with one another and had conversations. I get a little bit tired of always being told it's the police officer's responsibility to do that. And from my view, it gets tiring to do it. It's like I have to go figure out who I'm going to talk to so that I can build a relationship so that they can trust me. I would love for it to start saying, hey, I want to get to know that guy better. I want to get to know that gal better. I want to learn why they're doing it. All those things. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but we even have a very supportive community, and it doesn't happen very often beyond the surface level. We get a lot of thank you cards and a lot of well wishes, but we don't get so much of the outreach. And maybe that's a function of reimagining police because of how we do our jobs. And because we only have so many resources, our officers don't have time in the day to just sit down and wait for someone to come in. In fact, if we sat in a coffee shop and we're sitting there and our stated or unstated mission was to interact with the community, we get complaints for being lazy cops sitting in a coffee shop. So instead we do, coffee with a cop, but the only people that come are the same 50 people.
Mhm, mhm,
So it gets tiring,
mhm,
but it's still worth it.
mhm. I want to bring in here 4 points that Brian Stevenson makes. Brian Stevenson wrote Just Mercy, and he's famous for a lot of things. He has a TED Talk if you want to hear it. It's beautiful. He amazing human being. But there are 4 things that he suggests. One is get proximate with the problem. So that's what I hear you calling for in a way, Alex, and get close, get proximate. How can you do that? Like I can call myself to task, because for years I had this fantasy of taking my boys and my grandsons, my sons and my grandsons, and no matter where we're living, taking them to the police department and saying, here's my kids. I want you to know them. They are awesome people. I want you to know them. I want you to see their faces. I want you to know when you see them on the street that these are people who've been introduced to you. I want you to come to dinner. Come talk to us, right? A group of us or whatever. And I didn't do that. But I certainly knew, I've known for a long time that would be an important move to make. So getting proximate. The second one is developing new narratives. So everybody on here has, I think, mentioned something that says the narratives we're telling ourselves they're worn out, they're not working. We need new narratives. Maybe it starts with an idea like reimagining policing. But new narratives that have fresh blood in them, that have fresh juice in them, and that don't take us down a rabbit hole of powerlessness and helplessness. His third one is do uncomfortable things. Well, to take my boys to the police department would have been to do uncomfortable things, and I didn't do it, right? I didn't do it. So, but I'm still here. I still can do uncomfortable things. What might that be? Like even myself showing up here in this town at the police department and just saying, here I am. What you want to tell me, anything that happened today, or that anything that's on your mind that bugs you about your job? Like, just be human, right? To be human with police, to go and take the initiative to be human would be to do uncomfortable things. And then the last thing he says is to stay tethered to hope. And so I think, this conversation is a demonstration of that. Because when you lose hope, you wouldn't even show up for a conversation.